mai kaunali'o, mai kaunalipo, mai kahikina, mai kaulana. E hele mai o e atu e hele mai e ku a ahina a tangaroa a tāne. E hele mai e kanaha i kalai e kanawai. E hele mai o e au makua. Mahalo ke akua. As above, so below. May it be on earth as it is in heaven. Please, give us this day and forgive us. Please, help us to forgive. Please, no temptation and no evil. Mahalo ke akua. May we be a blessing to each other. Mahalo ke akua. May you be a blessing to us all.
Of the raping of the land, of prejudice and superstition, such things have no place in Bali. I have listened to my heart, and it speaks to me of danger, of danger. I have watched the tides of change in a homeland overrun with strangers. Of a people.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good Sunday morning. It's really nice to be here with everybody. And GFO, you know, which in the old days, way back in like the 80s and the 90s, used to mean get up, out, get up, out. But no, man. No, these days, it seems even internationally, it means George Floyd outrage. You know, it means folks worked up. And I got to tell you, in hindsight, I didn't actually think this was going to extend beyond the United States borders and territories. On account, I thought the world had assumed this position. Oh, in America, they're all racist, crazy, violent shitheads. So, you know, this is their problem, not our problem. But it turns out everybody in the world is so wise. They seize the moment and they go, you know what? That problem is our problem. That's my problem. That problem is right here with me. The way human beings treat other human beings. The way humanity is to humanity. You know, let's not forget. Let's never forget that those humans in uniforms, in authority positions, who move around and exercise power and dominance over us, they work for somebody. They get paid by somebody. That somebody is supposed to be you. That somebody is supposed to be you. But sometimes that ain't always the case. And you know what? I think the world is waking up to that. The world is going like, hey, maybe these fellas work for somebody else. Maybe these guys got a different agenda than the agenda of the community. I don't know. This is kind of difficult discussion. And, you know, if we're going to talk about the community, well, heck, I might as well try to have the community with me. You know, and whenever you talk about having a community with you, it's unsurprising that things go dark. Because that's the way it is in community. You never know who's running everything.
There we go.
Jimmy Love,
Good morning.
how's it going?
So were you trying to queue up a clip there for us to see, or?
And then I was trying to cue you up, but that's the way it is in community. I think we're being watched. Yeah, man, that's what I mean when I say community, right? There's always that crazy conspiracy theory, right? Oh, yes, the government. You see how they're censoring us? I tried to go to you, and we went to black instead. Woo! It's like a 5G thing.
Yeah.
You know, this sounds like the kind of conversation you could hear at a George Floyd protest, right? It's like you hear everything from, you know, the damn John Birch Society to, I mean, it's a hodgepodge. But people are spilling out into the streets together. I mean, they're even marching in Honolulu, which they oughta. Because, boy, if there's ever a military-industrial machine-controlled town, that would be Honolulu. You know what I mean? So, interesting that they're marching even there. And all over the world. Brazil, the one that struck me deepest was the marching in the West Bank in Israel. You know what I mean? That, my friend, is a serious walk.
Yeah, they know about oppression there.
Yeah, just a little. Right? They've been at it for what? 2,000 some odd years, given the date.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as happens more often than we would hope, if you let the wrong people pull the carriage, you know, you end up where the oppressed becomes the oppressor. And
yeah, I mean, let's take a look at that. That was like, you know, the transitional blueprint. When we moved from dictator, when we moved from oligarchy into, oh, that's representative democratic process in the marketplace. And of course, I'm talking about Netanyahu and his gang that came down from Eastern Russia as immigrants, right? And all move into the Middle East area. And pretty soon they're the dominant population and the dominant money and the dominant political faction. And they got a lot of resources, and they're beginning to dominate not just politics, but the social experience there along the waters of the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
You know, these are Eastern Russian immigrants who have all been moving to Israel since the 60s, since the United Nations, since America created this little pocket over there. You know what I mean? That's in what? In league with the New York sort of Jewish mafia. I mean, we used to talk about the mafia like the mafia. We used to talk about the Israeli gangsters just like we talked about the Italian ones. But we don't do that anymore. Now they're all respectable textile businessmen, and they're in the entertainment industry. Fabulous. You know what I mean? But it's still the same players, still the same people. And Jimmy Love, last time I checked my memory banks, you were from Hollywood, right? You were from the land of influence and media on the West Coast, run, they say, in the dark little alleyways off Ventura Boulevard by the Jewish mafia over there on the far side of town. You know how they talk about it in Studio City. You ever heard any of those rumors? And I'm sure they're just rumors.
Well, it's an interesting hodgepodge of people that are willing to, it crosses all national lines of people who are willing to go for the gold ring and step on people's backs doing it. It doesn't matter really what your heritage is. It matters who you are in the moment. And
brilliantly put, right?
So here
and
we
in
are.
fact, you could even suggest that that old boogeyman, you know what I mean, of the studio and the power and everything, is just a giant smokescreen. Because the fact is, they're all independently greedy, independently self-obsessed, myopic, self-serving, and they all flock to the tiny little desert in the southwestern United States.
I often wonder, because my pool of actual knowledge is pretty shallow, but I often wonder if we hadn't had our upbringing as humans. Well, it took a wrong turn somewhere in my mind. Like we were in this sort of balanced tribal existence, and then all of a sudden there was this monarchy who gained control, sort of with, I don't know, controlling the food, feeding the soldiers. I don't know what it was, but it became these machines of acquiring more and claiming more and getting more. And we're still in that mode. You know, here we are, it's the freaking 21st century, and we're still operating on something that's, 1,000 years old at least, you know.
Oh,
and
yeah.
1,000
years.
Right. Yeah, the thing that T.H. White wrote about, you know.
Yeah.
Right, you know, well, might isn't right. That's the whole point of that story, is that might only serves itself. And that doesn't give you any balance.
And we wrestle, right? We all wrestle with it. And so I think what I'm seeing, I want you to check me on this. You know, it's like an old block and check. You know, it's, I think we're seeing the power of we over me. And that's what I mean when I say there's 1,000 issues in the street, but they're all out there walking, right? The one thing they all know. And this brought about through the virus, through coronavirus, through the idea that they were all isolated for about, 60 days. And everybody just kind of built up this whole, and then they see all of this, and now people are just pouring out of their homes. I thought it was interesting, the overarching popular sentiment yesterday I was hearing online was, hey, George Floyd survived the COVID-19 virus only to be killed by police officers. So since I'm as likely to be killed by a cop, don't be threatening me with this virus. Right? It's like, I'm just as likely to die through police violence as I am through some pandemic. So we're going to come out and say something about this, which is interesting. Me, Brianna, all the other names starting to get mentioned. And boy, if we were to go down a list.
It's a sad list.
Oh, man. And that list, we could get to 2018 and the human race would be overwhelmed by that list. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? We wouldn't even have gotten to 2010. And brother, don't get me back to 1971. You know what I mean? It's like, that's a whole different list. Right? So, this is a real interesting point in America. This thing has turned into the George Floyd moment. No, it's the race moment. No, it's about police. No, it's about civility. You know what? Seems like we're circling the drain and coming closer and closer to this is about authority and power.
There you go. And that's probably the best, oddly, if there is a silver lining here, it's that people are realizing, and the COVID thing, I think, was the portal through which this realization arrived, is that our leadership sucks. They're not ready for anything, really, except to keep money flowing into their pockets. That's the only thing they're prepared for. So it's this realization, and now there's going to be this moment, hopefully this moment will be followed by a resoluteness to change our leadership and find the people who should be leaders, not the people who want to be leaders, and like I said last week, there's people that want to help somebody and there's people that want to be somebody.
Oh, wow.
People that want to help somebody. Those are our leaders.
I know, it's pretty prophetic. You know what I mean? The conversations we've been having, like I say, they seem to have been about these changes we're seeing almost in real time, and watching people like Governor Cuomo, several others, speaking right to the point you're addressing, right? Some people are assuming leadership. Some people, just want to be seen in that position, but not making any decisions or taking any risk. I've been really impressed with Newcomb over in California. I mean, the last bit of communique that they did was so well done, smoothly done. Delivering the information in a way that we could get it, and really bold stance, bold moves, unapologetically just moving forward, while we see lack of leadership inside the Beltway. So this is really interesting.
The difficult thing for us as viewers of our human condition through the lens of corporate-owned media is figuring out who's just talking and who really believes in what they're saying.
Thank you. Yeah, and because the political impacts have been so great, we can't tell whether it's politics, marketing, media, or leadership, because of the way they've interfaced.
Hey,
Brother, good morning, good morning. I was telling Jimmy Love, I thought I'm attributing all of this to the federal government purposely trying to keep us from speaking to one, which of course sounds like any of the conspiracy BS out in the streets that we find ourselves dealing with, but real moment, and good to see you.
Likewise, brother. Sorry, we were knocking on the door, but we had the wrong address. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, you kidding? So you see that I can slip back into my paranoia and go, oh my God, Zoom is purposely trying to keep us apart. It's
yeah.
Amazing.
That's what happens when you name something after a DC comic character, right?
True enough, bro.
There's always a villain somewhere.
Yeah. No
hey, what's
kidding.
up, brother? How's it going? So Doc's probably knocking too. So I'm just gonna send him the new link.
You got it, man. Thank you.
I think Chris was trying to figure it out, but
me and Jimmy we were on a roll. I mean, we were talking about how I actually watched a couple of our old episodes just to see if man, we're being kind of prophetic. We seem to be a week ahead of everything. This is supposed to be hindsight. We're supposed to be looking back, not looking forward. But that's the nature of history, right?
That's right. Well, that's Kavama Mua, Kavama Hope, right?
Aiki.
Right. It's all a reflection. As we reflect, we reflect.
Right. That is precisely it. And I was talking about this GFO moment, right? The George Floyd outrage. Right. And seeing it really surprisingly being grabbed by the word, Polly!
There you Yeehaw!
Good morning. And here we are playing guitar, relaxing. How you, Bob?
Linda's taking good care of me.
Oh, nicely done. Somebody ought to take care of Linda. I hope that's you.
That's what the Ohana is for.
My name. I was this morning with Jimmy Love. I said, we went to the opening of the show, but the screen went black for like about a minute. I was, what? And we came back and I laughingly said, hey, that's the federal government trying to put the kibosh on us, And then you guys were in another address room, and I said, hey, wait a minute. We're talking about all this conspiracy theory, which is what we find out in the streets, accompanying the George Floyd outrage, which I gotta say has become quite the moment internationally. I was telling Jimmy when I saw the West Bank protests, when I saw what was going on in Brazil, this all being led by this awakening. It's as if the world's been waiting for the American public to stand up to this kind of inane, authoritarian, use of force. And then the rest of the world is feeling emboldened, to collect its people. And as I said to Jimmy, a lot of this is probably driven by the fact that for 60 days we were all isolated. that human beings who normally gather in groups and, we're all teased apart by the mechanism. And so this moment, what I've been watching trend is this idea of George Floyd having survived COVID-19 only to die at the hands of this authoritarian machine. A lot of young people are saying, listen, I'm likely to die from authoritarian violence as I am from a pandemic, so I'm going to jump outside of the house now and spend time with other human beings, which of course increases risk all the way around. But risky behavior is always been part of the equation when we see these transition points, in our history, in the social history of humans. And we may be, as we've been hinting, at another one of these large moments where the world is experiencing like conditions, everywhere, from a transpersonal experience, isolation, doubt around authority, a real desire to make the world a better place. If not to save the environment or save the whales and seals, at least to get a good cup of coffee down at the corner. To make the world a better place by whatever their standards are. People want it to change from what it is in the present moment, and they're finding the courage to move out and enjoying each other, even in the face of a contagion. This is interesting behavior. The idea of I'm going to strap on the mask and walk out into a large group of people when I know that that's the wrong thing to do, but I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do. Yeah. Looking back, using hindsight, hell of a week, fellas. Hell of a week. Yeah. Right? Go around the clock. Tell me what you think is going on.
Well, it's either the tiger outside or the snake inside, right? They're trying to determine which beast you want to fight first. Jimmy, how's it, brother?
Good.
I think your point earlier about leadership is key to a lot of this, right?
Yeah.
I think you're finding some self-leadership going on. People are deciding, what do you follow? Who do you follow? Why do you follow? Right? And are you following or are you going to lead? And so people say, in the absence of leaders, in that vacuum, others step up, right?
And those are typically the ones we'd rather not have.
Oftentimes that is the case, right? But as they say, if you're in the front, you're leading, regardless of where you're leading them to. And if there's someone in front of you, the view never change, right? That's the view you're going to get.
Don't follow too close.
Thank you, brother. That's somebody in front of him. That's somebody in front of him with the view not changing, right?
Yeah.
Are we, in other words, as we move from this moment to really it's about authority and power. And for traditional people, and I say this addressing Pali in mind, we come from a culture where there is accountability to authority and power, right? So we respect authority and power because we anticipate a balanced, measured, leader-like response from authority, right? It's like we have this expectation that authority is not something evil. Authority is something we've all graced to an individual that we trust, to lead us directly in the right way. I'm saying that, offering that may not be the case presently. And so, Pali, how do we react? How do our value sets accommodate this lack of leadership?
Well, I've tried to separate the causes and the effects, so I don't confuse one with the other, and it's very easy to do. Also, the opinions of people, I think, are very important. I highly value the right to protest. I strongly support it, and I will defend it whenever and wherever. However, it depends on who's doing the talking and who's doing the representing. The leadership issue was very, very important, at least from the perspective. I find a warrior who found peace a greater mentor than an advocate of peace who has never been a warrior. If you've never defended through violent action the innocent, the vulnerable, and the weak, how can you talk about justice? I often tease my relatives who I dearly love that I call them condominium Polynesians.
Sorry.
They're constantly advocating and protesting this and that on behalf of our people and our culture, and they've never lived there. But they're pure in heart, and I understand that. But like I said, they're advocates of something when they've never defended it. They've never lived it. Right. They don't appreciate it and are able to understand the importance of balance and harmony. So, and I always go back. The basis is not for violence sake. Culturally, our core anchor is aloha. And if it doesn't come from there, that's the other thing I'm listening for in all the rhetoric. Right. Where is the aloha listening? It's anger. It's vitriol. It's hate. My ears are culturally attuned to aloha, and I haven't heard too much of it. So I'm still watching. So.
Yeah, Pali, we actually experienced that this week in a case where someone was asking for that kind of guidance. And when we went to the recommendation for inclusion, right, to talk about this, and the use of aloha was brought up, it created an interesting response that this isn't the time for that. We need to go and support, right? And in fact, the question was, well, what you're saying is that all lives matter, but really it's about Black lives matter. And that was the anger coming through. So my observation was, we're disagreeing, but not because one is right or wrong, but because we're seeing this from completely different perspectives. We've been on a long journey, right? Some are just getting started, and this is the first wave that they've seen, right? We've been through many waves. It doesn't make it any easier. We just know what they look like.
And we used to hanging on. Yeah. We used to hanging on, you know what I mean, as the water comes up.
Right. Yeah. And so I think there is a time in the spectrum, a time for dealing and a time for healing. We've adopted a time for healing as the way of dealing, right? And I think there's many who are still looking at it from the weeds, while others are looking at it from the trees. It is the same thing, but the way we look at it and how we anticipate what it's all about is very different.
And how much?
And I think those of us looking at it from the trees are seeing more than those looking at it from the weeds.
Right. And is it because?
And it's not wrong. It's just that's what they see.
Is it because of accountability, right? And we talk about accountability, but is it because in the way humans are acculturized, accountability means deficit, loss versus profit and gain, right? So in other words, they cannot come with their perspective to the intersection without wanting retribution, you know what I mean, or something back, right? They're looking at like assets, lots, and they feel there's not a balanced accountability. And I think that is predominantly because we're all injured, because all of us are traumatized, because we haven't come looking for a healing, We've come looking for accountability, for our accounts to be settled. Hey, that's been going on in Italy for like, what, 3,000 years? Didn't work out for the Medici, right? It doesn't work out, this idea of, I'm going to get even. We're going to settle accounts. You know what I mean? That always seems to lead to the next iteration of violence.
Right.
And when do we pull it to a stop?
Right. But this is the spectrum, right? Kubler-Ross talks about it in terms of the denial, the fear, the anger. So the human condition is the same depending on where we are, the delta of time. And we're right. So those and time, right? There are those before that are going, others like what is going, and then there's we got to fight this, right? And we need that kind of energy, but it goes back to leadership. How do you lead and how do you shape that energy? And Paulie, to your point, we have to aloha that into that space of healing, right? I cannot say you're wrong, but we have to demonstrate now the preferred condition. And it's ironic because there was even a comment, not just this one person, but a number of people talking about the differences between diversity and what this so-called. But for me, diversity is actually the term of the group that has excluded others, right? To make it easy to say we need to unify them, right?
Yeah.
Yes. When we talk about diversity, we're really saying we want unity. But the only way we can call for unity is we have to define it as diversity.
Yes, yes.
Right? So that's what we're arguing for. We're arguing for unity, but we're calling it this other thing. And every time we diminish the unity by going back and fighting for diversity.
And I don't want to have, a bifurcated conversation where it's just me and Ramsey, but I want to jump in and say, when I'm looking at the change agency, the church and religion on a Sunday morning really come up, because we're talking about these strange paradoxes, right? The sacrament, the act of the sacrament within the church at its fundamental place is to instruct the soul that you are not alone, that you are in relationship, that others are having the same experience you're having, that you in fact gathered today in this church with this community to commune, to actually be part of this group of sea monkeys that came up and shouting at the stars, and finding their way forward together with meaning. Now that going on, all that being said, it's challenged by this very moment, by what does it mean to be together? What does it mean to separate? What is the power? And I think this idea of the humans experiencing sacredness of life together is actually what is calling these bodies out of their doorways onto these streets. I mean, you're seeing Auntie Millie, 67 years old with her walker walking down the street with these people. This is, I'm not talking about the nighttime riots. I'm talking about what you see in the daytime, what I see moving out and moving together en masse. It's a real change. It's a real paradox in terms of its response to authority insisting that we separate and be still. The people are simply not listening.
Yeah, I think those that at least have one hand on the reins of power and the other hand in the cookie jar are just hoping that what's going to happen here is what usually happens. The people flow out on the streets, they spill their anger in protest, and then they go home. And there's a period of time, and everybody has to get back to feeding themselves and clothing themselves. And that occupies their time. Their work doesn't really give them time to separate the wheat from the chaff. It's just a difficult thing to do as you're hunting and gathering, using old world terms, and so you look to your leadership And what I truly hope beyond anything else is that this sort of sequence of events allows people to see that they have to participate in a meaningful way with aloha to find out who should lead them. You can't just turn on channel 2 and find out who's the leader is going to be. That doesn't work. You know, you can't just come in from a hard day at work and have a beer and turn on the game and then watch the 10 o'clock news. It takes more time than that to be a participant in your community. And it's asking a lot. It's asking a lot because I know how tired you get trying to just pay the bills. And especially if you're in the lower classes. Especially if you're in the lower class.
And let's, coming to Pali on this too, because of the economics, let's not forget that we're at the stage where $92,000 a year puts us in the poverty class. $92,000 a year means you're in the poverty level in Hawaii. Well,
I don't know the source of those numbers, but
the U.S. Census. So this is actually the administration's numbers. They made the decision up the line to 92,000 this last year. Literally, I'd say 90% of the people in Hawaii are under the poverty level.
Yeah, I just don't know what that refers to as in terms of a family.
Family of 4.
Jimmy, they're using it so that they can adjust the average, the AMI, so that when they give out affordable housing,
they know where the cutoff is.
Right. So by raising that, they raise the AMI, which means now I can build a condominium for $1 million and make it okay, because then I can start providing. So by shifting that line, all the other lines begin to lift, which means that I can build more stuff at a higher rate because I've made space for more people to participate in it.
Right.
Right. Which is kind of bass backwards when you really think about the reality of it.
I like the way you said kinda, Ramsey.
Yes. The human kinda.
Yeah, exactly. The human kinda. It kind of looks that way.
Yeah. Not so kinda humankind. Right.
It's true. It's true. Pali centers right on it.
Yeah,
Where is love? Where is compassion? Where is collaboration? Where is understanding? Where is the willingness to inspect your own perspective? You know what I mean? In an attempt to heal the moment. I don't see healing. I see the Band-Aid being ripped off. I see us washing out the wound. What I know is healing is a process. Better clean out the wound. Otherwise, reinfection. You know what I mean? So I got to fight my own angst. I got to be patient myself, and wait to be invited to the proper opening, right? It's, how I trust you guys. We have our Sunday conversation because, like me, I believe you guys work on solutions, not just coming with the problem. You know what I mean? And the trouble is when you're holding a solution in your pocket, it looks like marketing when you try to bring it to the group. You have to wait for the community to want the solution. It's what Buckminster Fuller always referred to. The answer is not going to become incorporated until it's incorporated by the public, until people are using it. And when it does happen that way, it's a cultural rise. So it's no longer an answer. It's just the way we do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if the way we do it with the industries we have, with the institutions, the educational institutions, our vocational training programs are all geared to one thing: extraction and exploitation. New studies, new figures show that in fact what we might be able to do is lead in terms of natural, nature, biodiverse experiences. We could become a tourism industry where people come to experience nature because they're finding it so put upon in the rest of the world. They cannot even find their biodiversity in Brazil anymore. They walk out, it's all cut down. There's cows and forests on fire. So they need to go to Brazilians to Kauai so they can get out in the rainforest and feel again this close tie to nature. Now, this relational aspect that is part of our heritage is about to be exploited by the commerce machine, right? It's like, you're right. They don't want to come and stay in resorts and hotels. They want to come and stay with the families and communities and directly interact with the environment. Oh, great. Let's send the predatory behavior out into the countryside and park it in the living rooms. Because, as Ramsey was saying, the people we're following are still only trying to extract profit at the end of the day to support their global markets. So we might be changing the way we behave on the ground, but the end result of what we're feeding is a giant economic machine that feeds everything to the 2% at the top. So I'm not sure how we're changing the structure, except to suggest that if the uber rich would be happy with 50%, we could use the other 48 to clean up the world.
What do you think, Doc?
Well, one of the things I'm curious about too is in listening to the issues that deal with structural violence or institutional violence. That's not just one pie. It's one slice of the pie. There are structural violence issues, gender, ideology, art. There are so many. And I get the impression sometimes that the very institutional structures they want dismantled, the solutions are going to be from the very paradigm that created the challenges in the first place. They have to come from a different place, and I'm not hearing anything outside of the same old box. So I'm going to burn down the house, but what do I rebuild it with? I use the same structure. See, I find that a little disturbing. But then, if you look at the basis of much of at least modern behavior is based on Western science, and that's from the 17th century on, the notion has been an obsession with control. That's not nothing new. Man dominating nature. The problem with that, and I agree with you, was that obsession has led to disaster after disaster after disaster. Yeah. And getting back to the fact that this obsession with control, well, there are other factors that aren't really looked at that are underlying issues. One of them is greed. One of them is just simple lust for power. It's irregardless of what part of the slice you're from. If you have that, no structure is safe from you. Human needs are finite, but human greed is not. And trying to encapsulate all that in terms of our beliefs, our paradigms, our obsessions, at least mine, with aloha and the spiritual aspect of our existence. And I realize now that the science does not need spiritualism. But in the same token, spiritualism does not need science. However, man needs both. And I think this is where the nexus, this is where that convergence comes, where the new solutions or new models can be introduced to resolve perennial ancient.
Beautifully put. I mean, we've talked about that before, right? You got your indigenous knowledge sets, you got your modern science sets, but really the innovation point is the student who's learning both sets equally, right? Who innovates and comes up with this mutated new notion of what it means to be human, right? And
Yeah.
Jimmy, there's a thing I want you to talk about because I keep hearing this phrase in my mind. When you're a fireman, it's a good thing that the world is on fire, right? It's like, so when we talk about authority or the positions of leadership or the response reaction teams or the police, what better use for the police and National Guard than there's rioting in the streets? I mean, this is actually a good driver. So I don't know how the emergency community is going to deal with this idea that's been floated around this week. Defund all the police, right? Since their money comes from the citizens' municipality, take the operating capital away. Jimmy?
Well, first of all, I want to make something clear. These guys aren't firemen. And
Thank you, Jimmy.
the second thing is that's seems to be the intuitive move, but frankly, I think just the opposite. And when they come out with this 28th Amendment to the Constitution that's been floating on the internet for the last decade, complaining about how the elected officials have it so great, blah, 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 blah. And we should cut their funding. And that's just an instrument. That whole dialogue is an instrument of those who want to shrink the best parts of government.
Yo.
And my theory, thankfully, I have this show where I actually have a chance to speak my theory, is double everybody's wages, pay the police twice as much as they're getting now, and offer 3 times the amount of training to go out and deal with the public, and get rid of that shallow pool of prospective policemen. Right now, you go looking for a policeman, your pool of talent is the last bit of water at low tide, just barely splashing up onto the sand. And the same is true with politicians. Pay them a lot more money so they're not corrupt, and jail them, charge them and jail them if they are, but get rid of the corruption by making them loyal. I mean, you have to give your life to be a politician. There's plenty of politicians who are just on the take, but the good leaders, they're investing a huge chunk of their lives into trying to make things better. And we need to attract people who are willing, who have to make that sacrifice. And it's no wonder they're corrupt. They're looking for a way to heal all this pain that's required to share themselves all the time. And, they're not, what is the president of the United States make? Excuse me, what is the salary of the president of the United States?
Right.
Now compare that. I don't even want to go to the billionaires because that would be ridiculous.
Right.
But, what about just a CEO of a company? We would save dimes on dollars if we would just use that money to pay and train police and politicians.
Well, let's back it up, Jimmy. You couldn't have nailed it better, because in fact, the president of the United States doesn't even make $1 million, right? So if that's the case, why'd this big old fat orange-haired billionaire want so desperately to be the president of the U.S.? So I'm suggesting that is a lie. That in fact, being the president of the United States is very lucrative. How's Barry doing now?
Yeah.
Being the president, that means there's hidden money. That means there's hidden agendas. That means from the onset, it's never been George Washington and the cherry tree. George got his slave to cut down the cherry tree. And that poor black boy got a beating from George's dad. And then George said, I cannot tell a lie. But I can tell about 200 lies, and we're going to go right on and create a country around that. And that's actually what occurred. And all of us having to live with this poison fruit that Ramsey described so eloquently a while ago, right? Same thing as you described those people who want to be somebody. As Doc was saying, they exist at every strata, at every level of society. You know, I'm sure in the janitor's corps, there's some really badly behaved guy who's throwing his weight around with the other janitors.
Yeah.
Right? This is the human species. All the little monkeys sitting grooming each other in the morning, and one big bad monkey gets up and starts smacking others around, and because he wants sex. You know, here we are. Welcome Sunday morning. Thank you, God. Welcome to the sacredness of life. Well, let me throw some water on the fire. What if hydrogen, not carbon, is the molecular seat of intelligence? What if the simplest molecule in the universe, the most detailed, prolific thing, hydrogen, holds the creation and the life and the intelligence? Hey, two hydrogen molecules walk into a bar, right? And they hang out for the evening and they make an oxygen. And next thing you know, we got water. H2O, two hydrogen molecules and an oxygen, atoms making a molecule, a single molecule out of hydrogen and oxygen. And then that water, like some kind of extraterrestrial, is moving through space and comes to Papahanauea encased in rock. And we study our science and we know that it bombards the surface. And my grandfather used to say, boy, if you want to understand patience, then know the woman who is the sea came here one drop at a time. So sit here and meditate on the ocean and remember, the woman that is the sea came here one drop at a time. That's patience, right? So this water, what if it's the thing that binds us all? As we say in our ancient cultures. Even the Romans use water in their ceremonies. You know, what if the water binds us all? And what if this moment when the world is on fire, we turn to the water? We're all 70% water or better. You mean all of life is within the water. Everything we do is water oriented. Should we be trying to look for the connectivity? I'm talking from what Pali said. He spiked this in my mind. Spirituality doesn't need science. Science does not need spirituality, but humans need both. You know, so maybe the science of spirituality should be the study of water. And maybe the spirituality center of science could be this very idea that water is conscious, as in, Masaru Emoto said, that water has memory, is reacting in the present moment. And could we, investigating this, give a different sense of hope, not just to humanity, but to all of the world? Now, I say this thinking, if we spent half the resources we spend on space cleaning the water on our planet, we would actually all be healthy.
Yeah. But the water thing, of course, we got salt and fresh.
Yes.
Some are more salty than others.
Weirdly, there's only 2% fresh water. And so I think the uber rich,
Isn't that interesting?
Right, they use this as their analogy for why they exist.
Right.
They see themselves as the fresh water that floats on top of the salt water, right? This sort of lens, but it's like, oh, what's going on, right?
Yeah, I'll just pick up on your water. This goes back to Pauli's point and the question of how we begin to teach. I'm told that fish swim in schools. Not sure what they learn, but they swim in schools. And the question is, how do you teach a fish about water? Right?
That is the question.
right? How do you teach an angry person about anger, right? About
Thank you.
If you're in it all the time,
Thank you.
and I call it out to you, it's like, what? Right? Until you're out of it, that's when you realize that you're actually in it. Right? And I can't get out of it until I know I'm in it long enough to get out of it.
Yeah. Ali?
And Ali, you're up. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I absolutely
Softball.
agree. One time we were young, there was a small whale that, one of the whale species washed on the beach, and the smell was horrendous. But it was there practically on the midsection of the village on the beach, and after a while we didn't notice. So we, of course, went and tried to obtain the bones because they're of great value. But by that time we had forgotten that there was a really foul odor. And it wasn't until people come visiting that their recoil reminded us of the terrible smell. And getting back to Ramsey's point, when you're in it long enough, it soon becomes normal.
Right.
And when it becomes normal, then it becomes dangerous.
You've been down so long, it looks like up.
Yeah, man. Jim Stafford. I've been down so long, I can't get up. You know what I mean? So, you know what I've been doing for the last 5 years? I've been getting up. Right? Getting up out of that bed. So does it take struggle? Is it painful? Yeah, sure. Hey, what the hell else are you doing on a Sunday morning? Besides, sometimes on a Sunday morning, they say it's good to be on your knees. So me, I like spending these mornings with you guys. You're about the brightest point I got all week, where we try to intelligently look at what we're seeing in an otherwise, highly rated television show of a life we got going on here. This is some pretty exciting stuff. And as we go around the clock and say goodbye to our faithful viewers, all 6 of them, you know what I mean? I want us to reflect on the Chinese saying. It's actually a curse. May you be born in interesting times. You know what I mean? And it's a curse because a blessed life is one that comes and goes in tranquil measure. You're comfortable with your family, seated comfortably in your natural spaces with your community. So this world we're in right now, where we're seeing the whole world every day on fire, makes it really challenging for the human spirit to find its way to that central source of aloha, that is so important to all of us. So me, I'm going to dust off my aloha and go shine it as big as I can. So hopefully we all remember to stay in love and stay in compassion and understanding. Jimmy?
Well, geez, I've only got a minute here. I don't know if I can summarize.
Yeah, you can take many minutes. That's the beauty of being online. We can go over the proposed commercial limit.
Well, first, let me speak to your Shiny or Aloha, because it's a game I used to play, still do sometimes. It's harder to play over here in Hawaii because people don't look at me and the size of me. I'm a big guy, and I walk into a room or something. The first reaction is, uh-oh, that guy's pretty big, and the fear registers. So I used to do this game when I walk by people on the street, because as they look up and they look up at me, I see that first reaction. And all it takes is a little smile. And the fear goes away. All you have to do is smile. And here's this, big guy that could be a threat, but no, he's okay. That means I'm okay. So that's a real tactile example of how aloha works. I'm sure you guys have experienced, especially you, Doc. You're another big guy. And, when you walk into a room and you fill the doorway, all of a sudden people are thinking things they weren't thinking a second ago. So spread a little aloha when you can. And the other thing I want to say is you mentioned I grew up in Hollywood. Well, that's true. And my family was in the film business, and they worked in the commercial film business as well. And, they didn't invent bullshit in Hollywood. They perfected it. So when you're out there looking at who might step up and fill the leadership void, please do not be fooled by their speechwriters.
Right.
Check out their history of their actions. Who are they as a human being? What have they actually done? Not what have they talked about.
Right.
So that's my advice for the week.
Nice, Jimmy. Rams?
Yeah. As I shared with a homeowner recently, is that when you show huli to someone who knows, they know. Right? If they know that from huli comes poi. But in order to get poi, you've got to get dirty. And you got to add some heat. And sometimes you got to get pounded. And the more heat, the more pounding, you get good poi. So
That's like being caught between a rock and a hard place.
So where's the poi, brothers? Right? Because we're taking a pounding.
Oh yeah.
We are certainly in the time of the huli. Yeah.
Iki.
Huliao.
Aye.
Huh? Yeah.
We're at that time. So I'll close with this last thing. I'll borrow from your Chinese proverb. Old Chinese proverb says, when your horse die, walk. Let's walk, brother. Let's keep walking.
It seems like they're all coming out into the streets and doing that very thing. Looks like you can't beat that horse no more.
No.
The Pali, show us the love.
Well, to maintain the integrity of your core values, especially us from a cultural perspective in Polynesia, listen carefully for any reference to aloha, and also listen carefully for any reference to forgiveness.
You
cannot have healing without both of those. And if they're excluded in the rhetoric, they are repeating the same process that created the very thing that they're opposed to. And it really gets back to a previous quote that we can heal our humanity, things that we can't cure with our science. So, it's that balance again. And of course, the foundation of getting back to earlier references to leadership, good leaders lead, great leaders heal.
Yeah.
Thank you, brothers. Thank you. My cup overflows this morning. Nicely done. Leaving you with a little song, little something about the water. Thank you, gentlemen. Always a pleasure to look back on the week and predict where we think we're going. Hopefully, we'll all get there together. Love you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Yep.
Steam becomes the clouds. The clouds will move between the hot and cold. They're gonna thunder up real loud. Then the lightning will flash. The wind will water will form at the edge of the storm. The rain begins to pour. There is only one big blue ocean. It's the sky above, it's the air we breathe. And the water is the deep connection. All of life must in the water be. There is only one big blue ocean. It's the sky above, it's the air we breathe. And there is only one true emotion. Yes, love is what we need. Only love can set us free. And the water will rush, the ground will push, the little teardrops to the sea. And the ocean will fill, and the sun still will light the water up beautifully. And the water will rise, comes as no surprise. Steam becomes the clouds, and the clouds will give what we need to live. Let the raindrops sing out loud. There is only one big blue ocean. It's the sky above, it's the air we breathe. And the water is the deep connection. All of life must in the water